talk about change. And so if we're on our journey, if we're going to be doing our work, our spiritual work, and living our lives, how we manage change, because we are a teaching that teaches the basics, as Dr. Holmes says in New Design for Living. Number one, we live in a spiritual universe. You either accept that or you don't. And if you accept that and understand that, then your life takes on a whole different experience. Number two, we believe that there's this aspect of creativity that Holmes referred to as the law. And what the law is, which sounds so stern and so inflexible, what the law does is everything and anything that we dwell upon in our being, in consciousness, we create a thought tendency. And that thought tendency eventually continues to plant the same seeds of possibility in our lives. And so there are patterns and there's ways of being that become the subjective nature, the subjective being that we are dwelling upon these ideas in a way that is consistent and repetitive, and it outpictures in our lives. So the law, responsibility, and task is simply to say yes to whatever we give it. So really, the law doesn't dictate to us. The law just simply says yes to anything that we give it. And that's why we know that as consciousness changes, as we change our attitudes, we change our ways of being, our life changes. But what I have found, my journey has been one, and I'm going to share with you my talk that I did at our annual conference. My changes have come over time. There hasn't been one moment where everything shifted and changed, although that has happened for some people in history. You know the story of Saul, the tax collector that was persecuting I think he was persecuting the Christians, but it could have been the Jews, and I think he was a Jewish tax collector, but he had the bolt of light, knocked him off his horse, and he changed his name and became a follower of the ideas that Jesus of Nazareth taught. But most of our journeys, we chip away at it. And I talked about this as one of the speakers at Asilomar this year, which was quite an honor because there were only a few ministers invited to speak at the evening sessions. And then, of course, so we have this law that we're always in relationship with. And the other piece of it is that God or Spirit, or whatever word you're comfortable with, is personal to all of us. So this idea, we live in a spiritual universe, that our thoughts impress upon this infinite intelligence a thought pattern that manifests in our lives. And also this idea of where we come into a relationship with the beloved is that loving relationship with Spirit. And so I love the song, Kingdom of Heaven is at hand, because it truly is. You know, Dr. Holmes said the Kingdom of Heaven is upon the earth. We just don't see it until we shift our perception. Well, in fact, I began my talk at Silomar in the Merrill Hall, and I said, I'm heaven. You know, this idea of this declaration, I'm heaven. Because heaven is this present moment awareness. So it's a journey, and it's gradual and it's sequential, but it requires the energy and the recommitment to continue to walk the path and do the work and continue to plant the seeds of possibility. And so to develop the discernment and the ability and the awareness that allows us to correct where we may be selling ourselves short in some manner or capacity. So I wanted to share with you a bit of the presentation that I did at Asilomar, and it was inspired by one of our members, Larry Anderson, who's writing a book. And Laura and I happened to go visit Larry and his wife Janet one day in preparation for a wedding that's happening in a couple of weeks, and he was sharing this chapter in the book with us. And I thought this would be wonderful to share with the community at our Asilomar conference. And it's really the story of Larry as going in, and we have the first slide. This is a picture, and I know that we may want to dim the fluorescence to see it a bit better. This is a picture of the Pieta by Michelangelo, and it is in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And so Larry has always been inspired and fascinated by Michelangelo, feeling he's one of the great artists of all times, and he really is. And so this is one of his masterpieces. It's a picture of Mary, mother of Jesus, after he has been crucified, and it portrays her holding his lifeless body. And it's just beautiful. Larry writes in this chapter in the book how perfect it is and how the detail, it's almost lifelike to see it. And so he began to speculate in his own awareness and say, is Is this his greatest piece? Is this his greatest work? And so Michelangelo, amazing story. I mean, he dropped out of school because he was called to art and creating in this way. So here's his Pieta. So Larry said, I want to go to Florence, and see David, because David is at the Accademia in Florence. And so as he was standing outside, and the next slide shows David. There he is. And David is 17 feet tall. He's perfect in terms of proportion, this sort of godlike quality, the mythic hero for the Israelites. And so, but one of his beautiful masterpieces of perfection that he portrayed. And so Larry said as he was standing outside with his wife Janet, they're in a long line waiting to go in and make their way down the hallway to see David, that he started making his way down the hallway, and then all of a sudden he looked to his side, and here was the unfinished slaves that Michelangelo started for the tomb of Pope Julian, but never finished. And the first slave as you walk in is the awakening slave, and I know that you cannot see it in great detail, but most of it is still in the marble, but it's a figure that's sort of trying to emerge in this awakened state. And so it's such a wonderful metaphor for this idea of the kingdoms of consciousness that I speak about quite often. In the first step in the first kingdom of consciousness, which is victim consciousness, where life is being done to us and there's all kinds of things that show up and we can feel absolutely victimized by it until we realize we have a spirit. We start to awaken. We realize, wait a minute, this is so uncomfortable now, I'm going to do this in a different way. So here's Michelangelo. So is this not alive alive in the consciousness then? And you can barely see a form starting to emerge out of this awakened slave. And then as you move down the hallway a little bit more, you see the young slave. There he is. And it's this youthful personification of consciousness awakening. It's the youthfulness in all of us. The personification of youthfulness is not chronological. It is a state of being. It is a way of being. And I was talking to someone on the way out the door after the first service, and they said that there's a book called Longevity, and it says within the book Longevity, the people that have a tendency to be happy-go-lucky tend to not have as long a life. But the ones that are driven and have a purpose and have something that they want to achieve while they're here tend to live longer. And I thought that was interesting. So to be clear about purpose and to be moving towards an expansion of one's life and one's experience and developing one's gifts and sharing them with the world is how I would verbalize that, has a tendency to keep us engaged and keep us in the game longer. And so this young slave represents that youthful persona within all of us. And the possibility, so the youthfulness is not just chronological. You can have lived 90 years and still have that youthful perspective of newness, of opportunity, of possibility, of the joy of life, of this day, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So beautifully sung. The kingdom of heaven is here and now. Not something to achieve, not something that through a meritocracy we work to achieve, but in fact it's an invitation of an experience right now. The next, and then Larry made his way down, and there's the Atlas slave. This is the slave with the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he's carrying it and holding it. And how many of us have felt like that? Anybody? The burden of life and how we can take on responsibility, and we can work too hard. We can drive ourselves too hard, and as they say, rode hard and put away wet, the vernacular of a horse. We can work and work and work and work and work. I feel like it's just such a burden to put the burden down. And so here, of course, and if you understand the life of Michelangelo, I mean, his whole story was the relationship, this contentious relationship he had with the Pope, and the demands to do more and more and more, to produce more and more and more. And so it was this whole struggle of the weight of it and to achieve, because he was driven. His art propelled him. He said that if people worked or knew how hard I had to work, if people knew how hard I had to work to achieve my mastery, they would not think it so wonderful. And so I think it's a metaphor as well as our own spiritual awakening. Our own spiritual awakening is not easy because it requires our spiritual calling. It requires putting down things that are near and dear to us. It requires putting down the idea that I don't deserve. But if I put down I don't deserve, what am I going to dwell on then? It requires putting down this Atlas consciousness that life is hard and it's a burden and I have to carry. Well, if I put that down, what am I going to do? Because I'm used to working hard. I'm used to the struggle. That's it. And so it's really, the whole spiritual thing is when we're stepping into the mystery and being willing to set things down so that something new can arise. That's what's going on in our organization with our annual conference. I believe what's happening at a deep level is a consciousness. People that are coming into our movement and are connected with our movement, we've all collectively grown beyond what a Silmar was 60 years ago when Ernest Holmes brought up a couple hundred people to this beautiful site and said, let's have spiritual camp together. This will be spiritual summer camp for adults. And there's children there as well. It's beautiful. And we'll go back. We just won't go back annually. Because what we're being called to do is be more in the world. And so there's ideas around regional events. There's ideas around telecasting. All of those. That conference should be available to everyone who wants to go on their computer and watch it. The Mormons have been doing it since 1986. It's just a couple of years after that. We're 2013 now. We'll catch up. But there's a lot of ideas around how we can simplify this and make it more accessible. If we're going to change the world, if we're going to impact 100 million lives, we probably need to change how we're doing it in ways. And so we're giving birth to that. But it's uncomfortable because a lot of people really like a Solomon. And so we told them, well, we'll come back. We probably won't come back every year. And there'll be other opportunities. But so here it is. It's not about holding what we have in place, but it's really about lighting our load, which frees us. And then the last unfinished slave in the hallway on the way to David is the bearded slave. And the bearded slave represents the maturity. If you notice, it's very difficult, I notice, the contrast in this room on the big screen. But what it portrays is someone, he's almost completed this figure. And there are a couple of straps still holding him back. They're on his legs. And so it represents wisdom, it represents the journey, it represents the maturity, and also represents that even at that level, there's always some restriction that's going on. There's always another opportunity to look, to bring up into our awareness that which no longer serves us, to bring it into the light of consciousness and dissolve it. And I think that is how we move into purpose and mastery. We are here for purpose, and our purpose, I believe, in an overall framework is that we are the individualized expression of spirit. Each one of us uniquely hardwired in different ways. Some sing, some write, there are many, many gifts and talents. But also the extension of, and those speak to career, those speak to specific activities. But what the opportunity is as we awaken, is the opportunity to be that portal of divine expression wherever we go. Now that's the ultimate. When Frank was talking about his song this morning, I was reading an article just in the wee hours I got up this morning about the idea that for someone that would use the phrase, and we hear it many times, that Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Well, if you're in the first kingdom of consciousness, which is victim consciousness, what the mindset is in that kingdom of consciousness to say that it is, here is this sort of Santa Claus-like figure, or fairy godfather-like figure that is going to save us. But as we mature spiritually, if we understand that all of a sudden we've gone from victim consciousness to manifestation consciousness, which is the second kingdom, to co-creation, all of a sudden to talk about Jesus as Lord and Savior means that consciousness is my opportunity and anyone else's opportunity to step into it, to become personified within us individually. So it's a whole different context of what those words mean. So when you hear that, when I hear that phrase, it seems very traditional for me, and sometimes I have to examine my own biases about that phrase. But it all depends on the level of consciousness it's being articulated from. And so then what I hear is, then I don't draw a snap judgment about it being a sense of victimization. I said, well, what is the level of consciousness that's being spoken from? Because I don't buy into the idea that I need to be saved and protected. I certainly want to be of value. I want everyone to be safe. I want everyone to be happy. But I don't think that I stand in harm's way. What I do understand is that as I do my own spiritual work, the opportunity for that anointed consciousness, which is what that Christ means is my opportunity. And so in order to get there, as Michelangelo demonstrated, it's to chip away. It's to chip away. It's to get up every day and do a little bit more to chip away. And that's why for myself I find it valuable to have meditation practice. I find it valuable to set an intention for my life, because as I dwell upon that, this infinite law says, yes, this is for you, yes. Anything we decide, see, we are a tradition of choosing. Our tool here is choosing. We get to choose moment by moment, day by day, experience by experience, relationship by relationship, how we're going to be in the world and who we're going to interact with. I have a list here that I brought with me. It was the 20 things the rich do every day, and I wanted to share with you because I think this is just the most interesting, fascinating stuff in the world. Is there anyone here that is opposed to the idea of having a rich life? Anybody here opposed to that? Okay, good. Then I feel free to share this. I think by a lack of showing of hands, I'm going to assume I have your permission. But here's some very interesting statistics compiled by Tom Corley. Now, I don't know how he measures rich. For me, abundance is being happy with what we have. This is an abundant day for me. And what I love is the idea that when I'm chasing something, when I'm grasping at something, when I have to have something, what it reinforces in me is need and lack. So I'm very mindful about how I approach things. So now when I see something wonderful that goes by that I think I'd like to experience, rather than say, oh, look at that so-and-so showing off, I said, that's for me. Something beautiful goes by, that's for me. So when the shiny thing goes by, which if you've ever been here with me before, you know a shiny object will distract me for a moment. That's for me. 70% of the wealthy eat less, this is consumption of food, eat less than 300 junk food calories per day. 70% eat less than 300 calories per day. 97% of what we would consider those that have less, or poor people as he refers to it here, eat more than 300 junk food calories per day. 23% of the wealthy gamble with their money. 52% of poor people gamble. Interesting statistics. So one of the things we know about an abundant life is this idea of nutrition. How we feed oneself, which is not the food that we consume a metaphor for how we care for ourselves. You know, when Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. was here, he said that once we learn how to love ourselves and honor ourselves, everything changes. And we can love ourselves by how we feed ourselves. 80% of the wealthy are focused on accomplishing some single goal. 80% are focused on accomplishing a single goal. So do you have a single goal that you're really passionate about? I bet most people here do. And when you achieve that, or you get closer, you find another one. Because it keeps us engaged, it keeps us in the game. 12% of them, and 12% of the poor, the less franchised, do this. 76% of wealthy exercise aerobically 4 days a week. 76% exercise. Because they know that along with having the freedom is being able to move and to enjoy life and to be able to go where we want to go and not be restricted by health. 63% of the wealthy listen to audiobooks during commute to work. I used to get really frustrated in California because I was always on the road. I was always traveling. And so what I had was books on tape. And I would have a book on tape, and it didn't matter where I was sitting. I had a clipboard and making notes for my Sunday talk because I was still doing the carpentry work, and I was educating myself. I thought, well, I'll turn my vehicle into a library. And here it is. Didn't know how wealthy I was practicing. 5% of people with less do that. 81% maintain a healthy to-do list. Things to get done. Things to get done. 63% of wealthy parents make their children read 2 or more non-fiction books a month. So if your dad starts making you read more books, you'll know why. 70% of wealthy parents make their children volunteer 10 hours or more a month. So here's Dr. Gans with his beautiful daughter over here. And she takes care of our nursery for us. She stepped up to do our nursery for us. She's been here every week for the whole summer. So thank you. You know, when I was at Sillamar, I saw Reverend Keith Cox, and Reverend Keith is one of the co-directors for our youth program, along with Reverend Michelle Lang, who came in and did some training with us. And so Keith says to me, looks me in the eye, as soon as I see him, he says, you know, I have a new hero. And I said, okay, who's that? He said, David Brown from Edmonton. There he is. Would you stand up so people can see you? I didn't know this, but David went with our teams down to Idlewild. And then when the fires broke out, and Keith described it in great detail to Laura and I one evening and talked about how David kept helping him move stuff, and he was right there like his right-hand man. And he said, David just told me, Keith called me to thank me, but had no idea. So David, thank you for your help with those kids down there and all that was going on. 67% of the wealthy write down their goals. See, all of these things we can do. Doesn't matter what we have in our life, we can write down our goals. We can have a to-do list. 88% of the wealthy read 30 minutes or more each day for education or career reasons. 30 minutes of reading. Their spiritual practice. Feed ourselves, expose ourselves to some new and interesting ideas. I like this one. 6%, this is number 11, it's almost at 11%. 6% of the wealthy say what's on their mind. 6% of the wealthy say what's on their mind. And 69% of the poor say what's on their mind. So what I know about leadership, and as I watch people that I admire, I watch Dr. Ken Gordon all the time. I'm on the leadership council with him. He is inundated with people's opinions about what should happen, especially with the postponement or the cancellation of the next year's Asilomar. And so Dr. Ken has his opinions about it, because we've had great discussion at the board level. He just listens. He just listens. Takes it all in, realizes this is my job. It upsets people. People don't like change. This is, and I have great memories. I mean, personally, I don't want to cancel the Asilomar. Oh my gosh, that's how I ended up here with you. That's how the members of leadership of this community went down, heard me speak in the chapel, said, you're going to be our new minister in Calgary. Edmonton, sorry. We'll take that out of the tape. You're going to be our new minister. Could have been, I didn't know Canada. I had to get a mailbox. Say, where the heck is Edmonton? Oh yeah, Montana. But the point being is that a lot of memories, and Laura and I have had so many wonderful experiences there. So personally, I don't want to see it go. But I also realize that what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve here? And so what I get to be able to do is have the discernment to realize that my personal goals may not line up with what we're called to do in a bigger way. And so that excites me, because that's a bigger yes. So anyway, but 6% say what's on their mind, which means that when we have the discernment to realize that when people come at us and they've got a lot of opinions and they've got a lot of concerns or they've got a lot of fears or whatever it may be, or they're complimenting us, to realize, and to just listen. Well, thanks for sharing. Tell me more. But on that lower economic scale, 69% say what's on their mind. I just think it's a fascinating statistic to look at and how we're operating in the world. It doesn't mean we don't love people, but it's having, I think, the wisdom and the mindset to understand that a lot of projection goes on in relationship. And typically what I'm saying to someone else is my opinions that I see, or my places within me that are seeking a greater experience of life that someone is modeling for me. And then I can realize, and then I can take ownership of it, and then I can ask myself, do I really need to say this? Because I don't think it has anything to do with them, other than I see myself in that person, especially when I'm critical of someone, when I fall into judgment rather than discernment. 44% of the wealthy wake up 3 hours before work starts. 44% get up 3 hours, well, they don't get up, they wake up. See, I wake up 3 hours before work starts too, but I typically don't get out of bed for another 2 hours. So. But 44% get up, and so they have things they prepare for their day so they can have a more interesting experience, perhaps. 74% of wealthy teach that good daily success habits to their children. 1% of the poor do that. 74% teach good daily success habits to their children. 84% believe good habits create opportunity for luck. So if you want to create more luck in your life, good habits. I'm told that people that make their bed have a more productive day than those that don't. Just look at your bed. I mean, isn't it interesting? We don't have to tithe anymore. We don't have to go to classes. Here's 20 things that we can do that help shift our consciousness from the outside in. I like that. It's like, oh, I can do these things. Make a list. Yeah. Eat less junk food? Yeah. 74% of the wealthy believe bad habits create detrimental luck. Now, 86% of wealthy believe in lifelong educational self-improvement. 5% of the poor 86, see, they understand. So what are we talking about here? I made a little list. Probably didn't bring it with me now. But we're talking about self-care through nutrition, having a list which helps set our invitation, which we would call an intention, but having a list that sets an intention, and then we continue to nurture it, which is the invitation. It's talking about the habits and practices that allow people to live a more valuable life. And it also ties in beautifully with this idea that when we have a purpose about our lives, there's sort of a draft, there's sort of a momentum that we can continue to generate. I was telling the fellow that was sharing with me the story from longevity that says that people that have a purpose live longer. And I said to him, I find it interesting because I find that as I go along and I do this work and I do this work and I continue to do my reading and I continue to have my life experiences and bring it back in and reflect and do my own healing work around it, that I think, golly, I'm figuring this out a little bit better. Why would I want to quit doing this? And so, but I think that's just the nature of the infinite wanting to express. And there's a joy around that. It's not a driven sense of gotta get it done, gotta do it, but it's this wonder and curiosity about what's going to happen next, what wants to happen here, and to be in that conversation is quite powerful and beautiful. The last slide that would go up was the slide of David, and you saw David, and you know what David looks like. But David is 17 feet tall. And he represents perfection. And I think that what we do when we decide that we're looking for perfection is that we sell ourselves short because it creates, I think, an unrealistic expectation. Because the perfection is a given. See, the perfection that Holmes talks about is this amazing ability for you and I to decide, this is my course, these are the qualities I want to embody, this is the way I want to live my life. And to go about the business of developing the consciousness that expresses that. And the perfection is that whatever the sum total, the tipping point of my consciousness that allows me to have that experience, I get to work with this law that is always precise. So the perfection is this infinite law that lives and supports each and every one of us unconditionally. It doesn't matter what we believe, but that we believe it. Now it does in terms of quality and morality and all that. I'm not saying that's not important, but that's at the level of the effect. I'm talking at the level of causation, and as we shift consciousness, we are able to heal, we're able to express, we're able to create, we're able to be more fully alive on the planet. But that's a given. That's true for all of us. No one is denied that opportunity. So perfection is a given. But I think what is more beneficial in my experience has been is not to seek the perfection. And when I first got into this teaching, I put a lot of pressure on myself because I felt like I had to be perfect. Because I didn't understand it. I was thinking about it at the level of my personality, at the egoic level, of the level of effect in my life. But I realized that law works perfectly all the time. And then the opportunity to perfect my relationship with the divine. Because God is, not only is the law impersonal, but God is personal to all of us. Because God is the feminine and the masculine. It's a principle. And it's everywhere present. And so the opportunity to realize that the way that I can have a deeper and more wonderful experience with that presence, that personal relationship with Spirit, is through peace. So then what has happened in my experience is not to seek the perfection, but to welcome the peace. Because when I'm at peace, when I'm in that state of, and peace for me means all is well, that life is eternal. And despite how uncomfortable I am in this moment, despite the chaos that has come into my life, because what we know, and what's alive on the planet right now, is the idea that with every new thing that has given birth, there's chaos. Our organization is going through chaos right now. We're putting down something that's been part of our tradition for years and years and years. That doesn't mean either or. It will be both and. We'll probably go back there, but maybe every 3 years, maybe every 4 years. Make it a big event, sell it out, create a demand. In the meantime, do regional events. So people like this community and people like Calgary Center, we could meet somewhere and we could go to Banff or we could go to Jasper. We could have, 150 people come together and have a spiritual experience together and be fed and feed one another. I think that's what we're being called to do. It's just because the universe supports a vacuum. So, this amazing teaching, this amazing, beautiful tradition that supports us and loves us and resources us, it is happening. The consciousness on the planet is shifting. I think an example of it is what I just articulated about our movement. We've grown out of this idea that you need to come somewhere and be fed by a minister or someone that is a leader or a teacher, in a sense, because the wisdom and the clarity, there's enough. We come together just for the reminder. I don't think I share anything with you that you don't already know. Sometimes I'll put a list together that I think is insightful, and sometimes I can share something. But the collective here, we're all part of this conversation. And it's just a beautiful, wonderful thing to watch unfold. So it is the change. It's the nature of change. It's inevitable. And how we manage it and how we participate in it is our opportunity to choose. But to not seek, as I say, to not make the determining factor of success be perfection, but peace in every moment, so we're available to that conversation, where spirit is everywhere present. And it's the development of that discernment and that awareness that allows us then to choose new in this moment, which will at times be uncomfortable. But it's a beautiful thing. When I got on the airplane to go down to California about 9 or 10 days ago, there was a woman that had come that Sunday with her family, and I recognized her face. Many times I don't see you for a long time, and you come in and it's like, hey, yeah, how you doing? And she was on the same airplane, and so we were visiting at the airport, and I got to know her and her family very well, because we were visiting, waiting. I got to be there 2 hours early. And her name was Mona, and Mona said, you have no idea the difference your community has made in our lives. Myself, my husband, my son. We came to your center 5 years ago, just before we moved to California, and we listened to your talk, and we enrolled in your philosophy and started to gather more information, and we now attend the center in Oakland. But she said, our favorite thing when we came back to Edmonton for this trip back to see family was to come to the center and see you and experience the energy there. And I thought, wow, what a sweet thing. I have no clue. But isn't it true for all of us? When we go out in the world and we take this perception with us, we take this mindset and cultivation of our own consciousness wherever we go, we are affecting lives we can't even imagine in our everyday commerce, in our everyday interactions. And I think sometimes for myself, I don't give enough value to that. Someone can come one time and their whole life can shift. She said to me, you started us on a path of spirituality that we didn't even know was possible until we came to the center. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen everywhere. It happens everywhere. And she was drawn here by right of consciousness because she was ready to have that be cracked open in her. But what a wonderful thing to hear and to be reminded of. Because sometimes we get so busy doing. And it's wonderful to hear people's stories of transformation. And it is the reason I wanted to share these sculptures with you is that Larry said that he just started sobbing as he was walking down the hallway. He didn't know what was going on. He looked to his left and his right and saw these unfinished slaves. And he realized, here's the metaphor for my life. It's not the perfection of David. It's the chipping away of consciousness. Day by day, breath by breath, thought by thought. That's our activity. And once we accept that and know that, it's like, wow, this is so cool. This is awesome. Today I get to chip away a little bit more of the marble that I no longer need to hold myself back with. Right? To be able to look at the limiting ideas I've carried with me that my parents or my grandparents or my teachers or brothers or sisters gave to me because they give you everything they have. And it's important to have that so that we have something to work through, otherwise there's no mastery. As Michelangelo said, if people knew how hard I had to work to develop my mastery, it would not seem so wonderful. But what a wonderful teacher, what a wonderful example of what we teach, the chipping away of consciousness. So I'm just filled with gratitude and joy to be part of this with you, to be part of a community that says, you know what, let's celebrate where we are, let's accept perfection as a given, let's embody peace, and let's listen deeply in our hearts and our minds, individually and collectively, and see what more wonderful thing this greater expression wants to happen here. That's the tribe we belong to. And it's a beautiful tribe. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for your love and support. And so it is.